my name is Ralph Galen, and welcome to 30 Minutes Lawrence. We can be reached at 30minuteslawrence@gmail.com. I'm a local minister and activist, and we hope through appreciative inquiry to go beyond the appearances and opinions just of the important issues of the day and empower people in their search for truth and justice. Today, we'll be talking with Jane Cadarette. I'm going to give you her contact. Cadarette, CADARETTEJ, at verizon.net, who, as part of Merrimack Valley People for Peace, is hosting on January 31st, 7:30 at St. Michael's Parish Hall, 196 Main Street, a convocation entitled "The Enemy is Us, the Perils of Nuclear Arms." Without further ado, here's Jane Cadarette, my friend, one of the most gracious and dedicated and compassionate people that I know, who's been working in the area of nuclear concerns and nuclear arms race for some decades now. And if you would, Jane, tell us a little bit about this event on January 31st and what you hope to promote.
Well, let me say thank you, first of all, for inviting me to come.
You're welcome.
We are really excited about this program. It's about the situation that we're in the world regarding nuclear weapons, the perils, and the clock, the doomsday clock that's only 3 minutes away from 12. And so it's a difficult idea, I suppose, to bring people together to talk about nuclear weapons, because not much was said during the primaries, but now things are beginning to heat up in the world, and tension is there, and there's all sorts of possibilities, whether it's accidents or actual war. So we have 3 very knowledgeable speakers who are coming. One is Sister Megan Rice, and she's a member of the Catholic Religious Order of the Society for the Holy Name Jesus, or the Holy Child Jesus, I think that's what it is.
Doesn't sound like a very threatening group.
No, not at all.
So tell us about this young firebrand.
Yes, this young firebrand spent most of her religious life in Nigeria and other countries teaching, and came back at the age of about 82 and began her anti-nuclear programs. And one of the things that she and 2 cohorts did was to breach the security line at the Y-12 National Security Complex in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. I think it was about the week before they did this that the government was talking about how well secured this Fort Knox of nuclear weapons, where they have storage for at least hundreds of weapons, the uranium and other war parts that are there. And to have these 3 go cut fences, walk through the woods, and cut other fences, and then eventually get to a building with no one detecting them, was a terrible, humiliating event for the government's wonderful security place.
This was in Oak Ridge, Tennessee?
Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where the Manhattan Project began.
So one can imagine that there's a lot of sensitive material It would be very dangerous to fall into the hands of our enemies, terrorists, and yet she breached this unbreachable fortress.
She did indeed. And I think she was doing it, they were doing it, I know they were doing it in order to help people become aware of the industrial military complex that Eisenhower used to speak of. And also the situation that we're in. And once they got to the building, they spray painted scripture on the building. Sister Megan had baby bottles filled with blood that people had donated that she spilled across the stairs. And that was to be the consequences of what nuclear weapons, to just satisfy that as a symbol. And then they also had police tape, the yellow tape that she put around 3 different poles. And they sat and waited until someone came with a gun. The last part of their journey to that building, there was a sign that said, anyone trespassing here would be shot on sight. And so they knew when they started out in about 2:30 in the morning to do this, that they were risking their lives. Now, that's Sister Megan. But Dan Zak is a Washington Post reporter. And he's a reporter who attended the trial back in 2012 of the 3 who did this dastardly deed. And so he wrote a story, 10-page story in the Washington Post with photos, known as The Prophets of Oak Ridge. And he then wrote his book, Almighty. And the Almighty, let's see.
I got here. Courage, Resistance, and Existential Perils in the Nuclear Age.
Yes.
And I think that's the point we're trying to emphasize, how perilous the situation is.
Absolutely. And this book takes you, the reader, from the very beginnings of the atomic age through the 70th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it's sprinkled throughout the story of these 3 very brave people who entered the Y-12 area.
So he's made this a cause célèbre himself, Dan Zak.
Yes, absolutely.
And he'll be there. Very eloquent and insightful journalist. And then there's a third person coming as well. That's Professor Elaine Scarry.
That's right, from Harvard. And her latest book is Thermonuclear Monarchy, Choosing Between Democracy and Doom. And she's maintaining that we're a monarchy when we have one person who can make the decision to let the nuclear weapons fly. And the rest of us are just have no say in the matter whatsoever.
Well, there's a President-elect, Donald Trump, who I'd like to think of as a split screen, if you will, politicking, campaigning, and making the statements that he feels he had to make in order to win the White House, and then we have yet to see the Mr. Trump in the White House, but on the way to the White House, he has urged a couple of positions, at least, that might be of concern to you. Number one, that he feels that any country that can get them should have nuclear weapons, including Japan. What's the problem with Japan having nuclear weapons?
Yes, what's the problem? Well, of course, it's the Article 9 in their Constitution that says they cannot be militarized. And the Prime Minister is trying not to eliminate Article 9, but to interpret it in a different way. And of course, the United States is very happy if they will militarize in case there's any problems that they would need assistance in their assistance in the South China Sea, perhaps.
Perhaps Mr. Trump is looking at this as Japan pulling their weight, and why should we be the only nation that has to develop and store these arms and keep them on the readiness, when in fact in Japan, according to David Rothauer's film, Article 9, if I remember correctly, there's something like 6,000 Article 9 clubs in Japan, where people are fervently committed to upholding that the doctrine espoused in Article 9 and remaining a country that is, in this regard, completely nonviolent. So there's the one proposition pre-White House that every country that can, I don't know if Iran was on that list, but why not see other countries have weapons as well? And then the what was the other point that? We should also increase. Mr. Trump had said we should also increase our nuclear arms capacity. Mm-hmm. How do you react to that? Is there a need to do that?
Well, you mentioned the filmmaker. Was it David Rothauer? He also has a film clip where he's suggesting that we have an Article 9 in our Constitution. Did you know that?
Remind me.
I had a chance to talk with him not too long ago in the fall, and we hope to have him come someday and talk with us. And maybe you'd like to talk with him too.
Yeah, what is our Article 9?
We don't have one.
Oh.
He's suggesting that we ought to have one.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. Now, regarding Trump during the primaries, I was thinking when I heard him saying, all these other countries should have nuclear weapons as well, I was thinking to myself, well, I don't think he really understands what is happening in the world and what nuclear war would actually do to the planet. And then I think that possibly by now he would have had enough information given to him that he would have changed his mind. I haven't heard him say he changes his mind. He changed his mind, but he probably has.
I'm not a big one for hope, but I expect, it's reasonable to expect that many of the statements that were thrown out in a kind of reactive way are going to be readjusted in a more responsible way once the complexity of the situation is understood. Let's go back a second. So bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we've been debating for 71 years now whether they were the cause of the end of World War II, and we will find still proponents that say that, saved the life of my family member who was in the South Pacific and avoided a bloody ground battle, and others who would argue differently, that it's first of all unconscionable to drop such a weapon, and secondly, after there was more destruction in the bombing of Tokyo, which brought Japan to its knees, and it was the bombs were dropped for political purposes to show the Soviet Union that we had this overbearing might, and they had better think twice about taking their advances in Europe, for instance. But what would let's say that by accident, which is what we fear the most, or, God forbid, on purpose, the signal was given to fire a nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. Our weapons now are so strong, and given the effects that we know of Chernobyl, what would a one-sided attack look like?
Well, it wouldn't be one-sided for long, because the fact that it was launched would bring about a retaliation, most likely.
Well, say that one side did get off an attack. Are those weapons fired without affecting, the atmosphere? It was indicating Chernobyl has gotten into the milk supply around the world, mm-hmm. and these weapons are more powerful than that meltdown.
One of the things I failed to mention about Sister Megan was that she received her master's degree in radiologic biology, or something like that. And so she's a very knowledgeable woman, and besides being a teacher, and she knows what she's talking about. And she knows that a bomb, say, going off in this country, even if it was the one that was described in Ted Koppel's book, Lights Out, a nuclear weapon set off in the atmosphere in the middle of our country could bring about the entire annihilation of the national grid. And it wouldn't be off for a day, a week, a month, but years.
So this is if the United States is attacked?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
If a nuclear weapon came over our country, this is what is in his book that mm-hmm. he's talking about.
Would that affect the other countries of the world?
Well, we wouldn't be able to get our weapons out, I suppose, if the powers that be decided to retaliate. They're all working probably electrically wise.
Well, we have X number of submarines that are armed with nuclear warheads that could do incredible damage, and probably one of the last communications would be go get those.
Yes. Unfortunately, yes.
People.
Oh, and it would be. It would be
the end of the world.
That's the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
This is the destruction of the planet.
And so maybe cockroaches and rats might survive in some sort of mutated state, but that would be the end of human beings. I
don't know. There's these very wealthy people who are building underground homes, even ranches for horses underground. This is amazing that they think there'll be something to come up to.
So Dr. King, whose birthday was 2 days ago, mm-hmm. he was born January 15th, 1929, and before he died, I think he was very clear about the role of violence, and stated, much as Professor Scarry did in her book, which talks about the choice between democracy and doom, he spoke about the choice between nonviolence and not violence, but either we're going to adopt nonviolence or we will destroy ourselves. Those are the choices. Mm-hmm. And when we think about nonviolence, we don't think about it as a very strong dynamic, except if we study it a little bit, as Gene Sharp did, we find out that it is tremendously powerful, and it was responsible for the gains in the civil rights movement, which for one reason or another, has, I thought, was stalled. But there's a new call now through Reverend Dr. Barber and other folks to regard our obligation in terms of nuclear peril to be a moral, spiritual, religious one, and to use active nonviolence. Active nonviolence employs what? Agapic love. I'm belaboring this point, but I want to unpack the fact that we don't love in an affectionate way Vladimir Putin or somebody that causes us harm, but we love them in an agapic way. That this kind of love, as Dr. King said, is understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill. So it's actively bringing into the world through your event on January 31st the fact that we must do the impossible, and we must do it through love and understanding and winning the hearts and minds of folks. I think you would agree to that.
Yes, I would. Yes.
And that we need to, as in the civil rights movement, to get out there and to have these educational events, and also to appreciate direct action. And that, of course, is what Sister Megan did. She wasn't there to destroy the Oak Ridge Center by any means. She doesn't want to see these uranium emitted into the atmosphere. She wants to say how fragile and vulnerable our position is.
It really is, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Let's see. There was something I was going to say about Sister Megan, but it just went in one ear and out the other. Let's see.
I get a kick out of calling her this young firebrand.
I know.
Because I don't use the word hope very much, but she instills in me the confidence to understand the situation truly, to speak truth to power, and whenever I can to take action, peaceful, nonviolent action.
Yes, yes, that's absolutely what she's doing. And the three of them are just going to bring our concern, help people to come in, because there'll be mainly question and answers after just brief presentations. And it will be the audience able to express their concerns and their questions and answers throughout the program. This is what basically how it will go.
So the American public, it seems to me, is so preoccupied with putting food on the table, having a job, that this issue is not seen as pressing. And in fact, if we could free up some of the money and some of the efforts, right, that are involved in the nuclear arms race, those would be trillions of dollars that can be devoted to human welfare.
Yes.
And I think your grandmother, and we talked before about possibly the simplest political platform that we can offer is the fact that we'd like to see this a better world for our children and our grandchildren, where they can exist in peace and in prosperity. So a very timely issue. I thank you very much for coming in and bringing this. So we're going to say again that on January 31st, it will be at 196 Main Street in North Andover, a presentation featuring Sister Megan Rice, who is a young activist of 85, who has been demonstrating the failure of our nuclear policies and the need to change them. Please come. You can also contact Cadarette J, CADARETTEJ at Verizon.net to be in touch further with Jane. I think we've made our point that we live in a very scary world. We're at the edge of We're 3 minutes away from midnight, and we need to change the situation so that probably we can avoid accidents happening that'll destroy all of us. War is not the answer. So thank you. I'm Ralph Galen. Thank you for coming, listening to this.